Let's make my Stackabond quilt pattern using only fat quarters. I am using a curated fat quarter bundle, and curated bundles can include a variety of mixed prints from either multiple designers, manufacturers, or a smaller bundle made from a collection. Now, I will have a link down below in the description from a quilt store that I trust and also personally shop at that does create curated bundles. Now, these are also usually made from the quilt store and bundles can be limited. But anyways, let's get started. You will need 12 fat quarters, and after you have ironed them flat, you will select 8 fat quarters and subcut them into 4.5 inch squares and 4.5 inch by 12.5 inch rectangles. Then with the remaining 4 fat quarters, you will subcut them into 4.5 inch squares and 4.5 inch by 8.5 inch rectangles, and you are done. Now, there is no block making, so we are going straight to laying everything out for our quilt top. Now, for the odd rows, you will start with a 4.5 inch square, followed by a 12.5 inch rectangle, then a 4.5 inch square, 12.5 inch rectangle, 4.5 inch square, etc. And for the odd rows, you will always end in a 4.5 inch square. Then for your even rows, you will start with a 8.5 inch rectangle, followed by a 4.5 inch square, then a 12.5 inch rectangle, 4.5 inch square, and then you will always end your even rows with a 8.5 inch rectangle. Now, doing so will give you that fancy bricklay layout, and it will be also pretty quick to make since we don't have blocks to technically sew together. And that's it. You'll just continue this layout with a total of 12 rows. Then as always, you'll sew all of those blocks together into rows, and then lastly, sew the rows together to complete your quilt top. And here is what my Stackabond quilt pattern looks like all finished. For the backing, I am using this grunge script print that is pretty decent for this quilt. Then as for the thread choice, I am going with Stackabond green, which looks more of a dark gold by Glide Thread. And here's what my quilt looks like all quilted. 12 fat quarters will yield you a 52-inch by 48-inch throw quilt. And I used Forest Walk by Creative Stitches for the quilting pattern, which I will have linked down below in the description. And if you would like me to quilt your quilt, I have opened up my Longarm quilt service, which I will have linked down below in the description as well. But I do hope you have enjoyed today's tutorial. If you could please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can be notified for your next amazing quilt project.